The first step that you'll need to do is take that 1/3 of your clay, so that clay that's left over, and roll a new clay slab. And remember, we roll so it has an even thickness. And once that slab is rolled, we can put our box and flip it over and begin tracing around the box. Now it's a good idea to make the lid a little bit bigger than the box opening, and you'll see why in just a little bit. Now I'm cutting out where I traced, so it's a pretty good circle, about the shape of my box opening. And this is a round box, but it's the same thing if you had a square box. You would just trace a square instead of a circle. And I still have a lot of extra clay, so I'm just going to check and see if the size is about right. And sometimes clay moves around, so you can always adjust it, move it around. And in order to get this box lid to fit, I'm going to actually press down the edges just a little bit. I'm making a pumpkin, so I wanted to squish down the sides a little bit to make it look more like a pumpkin top, kind of like a jack-o'-lantern. And this is going to help keep the lid on. You don't have to do this, you could do it a couple different ways, but this is one option in order to keep the lid from sliding off. And now I'm going to be adding a stem, like a handle, that I can then use to lift the lid up easily. So the stem is going to be part of the pumpkin, and I'm using addition to add that stem. So I scored and added some water, and then now I'm going to make sure that it's really secure by smushing the clay together and smoothing it out and making sure that it's sticking all right. And you can use a wooden tool to do that, especially if it's a smaller piece like this. It might be kind of hard to fit your fingers into. So you can always use a wooden tool. Make sure it's really attached. I don't want it to fall off. And I'm kind of shaking the table, but now I'm going to roll one of those little curlicue vines that sometimes you see on pumpkins. So I'm rolling that, and then I added that with some water. Now I'm going to cut out the eyes of the jack-o'-lantern, but first you need to draw and then cut second. So draw it out first and then you can cut it out. And I'm using a clay knife to cut out these larger pieces just very carefully, kind of like if I was actually cutting out a real jack-o'-lantern's eyes. Now this knife really isn't sharp, but you do have to be careful. Watch where your fingers are and make sure that you use it responsibly. You can just kind of push out that extra clay, very similar to carving a real jack-o'-lantern. And you would do this if you had to cut out any places, so maybe if you had your name or a face or some other details, then you would cut it out like this. If you have some holes, you might just want to stick a pencil inside to make the holes instead of using the clay knife. The clay knife doesn't really work so well about making holes, but it can cut out details. And then you want to smooth out any clay boogers or places where it's a little bit rough, because those places can cut you if you do not smooth them out now. So I'm smoothing them out. You can also use a little water to help you smooth it out. Don't use too much, but you can use a little bit of water. And now I'm going to put it back in the bag because I'm not quite finished. You need to put a paper towel or newspaper between your lid and your box to keep it from sticking. And this is just to make sure it doesn't stick together, because that's kind of a bummer when it sticks together and you have to try and get it apart the next class. And now I'm going to put it into the bag, and if you have a hard time fitting everything back in, you can always put your extra clay inside of your box. But mine's fitting pretty well. You just got to do it kind of carefully and then securely close your bag. And the next class we'll be using smaller details. We'll add some small details, and then we're also going to do a technique called burnishing.